Okay, class. So for this third class on time-based stuff, we are going to cover um, delays, how we use delays to enhance space, and how we use delays as an effect, as well as how we use reverbs as an effect. I'm going to try to explain also how I use choruses and flanges and possibly phasers. Um, the 2 points that I'm always trying to explain within usage of time-based effects is from the point of, are you using a time-based effect as part of sound design of an instrument, or are you using it as a mixed tool to create depth and movement within a song? And I know that those sound kind of almost the same, but really isn't, in the sense of, if I am developing a synth, and let's say it's a saw synth that I'm trying to get kind of like brassy hits, and I'm just doing this groove on it, percussive groove. If I don't put any reverb and effects, that saw is going to just stab in and out, and it's going to have a little more of a percussive effect to it, and it may not necessarily fill in. But if now I take that delay, I take that sense, and I put a dotted eighth note delay, and it does, right, and it has this awkward kind of off bounce because it's a dotted note. Now it's a two rhythmic element to it. Now if I throw some verb, short verb, on the sense and on the delay, and I blend it all, now that verb, that sense, is going to trigger this wash on that. It's going to extend the percussiveness, and now it's going to become more of a polyrhythmic element that I've extended the function of that of that sense, and it starts working like a pad, and it's now a rhythmic pad. And I can now take all those three elements and blend them into one, render them in one, and when I mix it, this is the sound of the pad, period. I don't alter anything else, because that's how, me as a producer, I envision the function of this keyboard pad, right? And I can pan it, I can EQ it, I can compress it in the mix, but I don't alter these other two elements because that is part of the process. Now, remember, I also come from analog synths world, where I would sit down and dial everything up on the actual keyboard. And if it, whatever effects it had built in, choruses, flanges, delays, I would dial it up. If I needed more, that keyboard was going to a mixer, and I had access to other effects racks, and then I would dial up those effects racks onto that synth pad, and I would program that MIDI pad to do whatever I needed it to do. So I would loop it, dial up everything that I needed. Once I got it dialed up, I would now print the output of that mixer into the DAW, and I have now committed the sound to that element. So, from my mind, coming from that mentality, that is why I consider sound design and using effects as sound design. Whatever else you do on top of that during the mixing to widen it, push it back, change the tonality, that becomes a staging thing, that becomes you using your tricks to make it fit into the track. Does that help differentiate difference how I'm seeing it? I'm like,
Yeah, 100%.
okay, good. Okay, so what is a delay? A delay is simplest thing to teach within the time-based stuff. You hear a sound and it repeats. Whether it repeats once or repeats multiple times, that's a delay. You can hear the repeats. A reverb is basically thousands of delays that are happening randomly, sort of randomly, all over and bouncing all over the walls, right? That's what acoustic reverberation is. But you, with our tools, we can use delay as a rhythmic element because we can dial it up to the tempo of the song, or we can just go by milliseconds and dial up the delay however it feels, right? And based on the information I gave you last time on the class, you can use a delay and set it on milliseconds to imitate a slapback that you would get from a room, depending on the boundaries, how close or far a wall is to that element. You can simulate the return of that instrument. The other instance that you tend to use delays, or you've heard of delays, is a slapback delay. And a slapback delay was used through tape deck delays, like echo verbs and stuff like that, where they would actually have a small reel-to-reel that the tape was a infinite loop, just a cassette cartridge that would loop. You had an erase head, a record head. You had an erase head, a record head, and a playback head. And you would be able to move the playback head closer or farther from the record head, and that's how you would manipulate the time of the delay. But it tended to be a singular type of delay, hence the kind of slapback. And because it was on the closer elements and it was very defined, it would just sound like it's just bouncing off of a wall, right? Most of us tend to use delays as a cool effect. You have ping pong delays, especially those are used a lot in choruses and pop choruses where the vocals are bouncing left to right. That's a really cool way to add ear candy elements to the mix, right? Very typical, you always hear some sort of delay on lead guitars. You tend to compress the guitars to get more sustain and you get more tone out of it. But then you also add delays to exaggerate that sustain and give a little more freedom of expression. And when you're just really bending those strings and getting to a nice solo, that helps open up and you can play around with a verb delay with that and expand on that palette, right? Those are the type of typical things that we assume and we use delays. Now let's dive in a little bit into something called the Haas effect. Somebody did mention that they do explain the Haas effect in this degree, right?
What was that?
The Haas effect, HASS.
Yeah. Like I use it and I'm familiar with it.
All right. So briefly, it tries to explain how we listen in stereo and how do we listen to different sources, and depending on the distance from the sources and the amplification from the sources, gives us that sensation of something's to the left or to the right, something's farther, something's nearer. So if you are standing in the middle of two speakers like I am here in the room, the sound is going to get from both speakers to my ears at the same time. If I now move to one side, the speaker on this side is going to get to my ear sooner than this ear. So there's going to be now a time shift. And that time shift of whatever amount of milliseconds is what gives us that stereo image and says, signal, I'm closer to the signal on my right than I'm closer to the signal on my left. Everybody following that, right? But you can help compensate for that effect also by boosting the signal on the left speaker so that it overpowers slightly the signal, the earlier signal coming from the right, and it regains almost the stereo image or stereo balance again. Keeping that in mind is a good way for you to figure out balance and effects and how to use these things. Okay, if you are within 5 milliseconds to 35 milliseconds of a delay from a direct source, you are going to be within a realm of comb filtering, audible, discernible comb filtering.
Oh, what was the number?
Anywhere from about 5 milliseconds and earlier than that, but from, let's say, 1 millisecond to 35 milliseconds, you will be within a range of discernible comb filtering. Do you guys know how comb filtering sounds?
Yeah, so that's pretty much all Slap and Haas. Not isn't aren't most
That's
slaps.
um slaps tend to be past that 35, at least how I
Okay.
use them. I tend to start slaps more 50,
Okay.
so it becomes a discernible repeat.
And what about Haas?
So Haas is within that parameter.
Okay.
All this is still kind of explaining the whole thing. Also, I'm really skimming through all this because that could be half of a class right there, right? But comb filtering, the issues with you dealing with delays and staying within those parameters of 35 milliseconds and closer, you are dealing with possibilities of comb filtering. And comb filtering is a negative effect of the source being in an acoustic realm, the source being too close to a boundary like a wall, and let's say my voice bounces on this wall that's 2 feet in front of me, and then the bounce gets picked up on the microphone. So you're hearing the delay affecting by creating multiple notch filtrations on that voice, which are changing the tonality in a very negative way. And if you have your ears dialed up really good, you can definitely hear when a microphone is set too close to a solid boundary, because there's a certain smearing and it sounds a certain way.
Not to get too off topic,
Sure.
but in that like on that vein, in a vocal booth, would you want to put the mic just like in the center of the room, like furthest away from all walls? I mean, ideally, you wouldn't be getting any reflections from the walls, but realistically, you're going to be getting some. So,
Well, it depends. It depends how well treated that room is.
let's assume it was treated by a college student with packing blankets, asking for a friend.
Uh-huh. Okay. So I if all full walls have packing blankets, I would put the microphone not necessarily in the middle. I would put the singer closer to the back wall, so as he sings, there's more space for the vocal to hit the wall and then get back to the microphone. So
Okay.
whatever low frequencies don't get absorbed by the packing blanket, they have a little more time, and you're adjusting and permitting for a longer comb filtering that you can hear versus a closer comb filtering that might be a little harder to hear. And just to continue on that, I'm going to use that explanation to continue the comb filtering. The closer you are to a boundary means the shorter the delay is going to be. The shorter the delay is going to be, the higher the frequency that you're going to comb filter at. Still, and again, that's why I really put a lot of emphasis on discussing wavelengths, because the shorter the wavelength, the higher the frequency. Here we go again, another example of it. The closer you are to the boundary, the shorter the wavelength that you're going to be affecting, the higher the frequency you're going to be affecting it. So you really don't want to affect, you don't want any comb filtering affecting that 5K to 1K area, because that's where all the clarity and the vocal are, right? Luckily, packing blankets will take care of a lot of that stuff. If we're gonna get into quick thing, what else to put? Have you guys seen what the chaotic eyeball is?
Yes, I was considering getting that. Would that
Get it.
be
Just get it.
okay? Okay, would it be in conjunction with
Yes.
my okay?
Yes. The more the merrier. I
Gotcha.
use that chaotic eyeball at WCF radio station when I have a singer, and I'll put that because you have anywhere from a 3 to a 5 piece band with brass, and I've put that chaotic eyeball on it, and it's helped a lot. At least diminish all the high frequencies from the cymbal, not all, but most of the high frequencies from the cymbals, from the piano, from the brass, and it cleans up a lot. And this is in a live room where, you know, it's a tracking room where everybody's clumped together. Um, I've the singer in my band, I made him get one because he has his office space and he insists on doing demos there. So he got the chaotic eyeball. There's absolutely no treatment in his room, and I found a good sweet spot where the low end doesn't couple too much. And he sings there, and I have no problem with it. There is some tail of reverb as the voice bounces on that wall, bounces behind him, and then gets back into the microphone. But here's to Patrick's point. I'm allowing that signal to bounce a couple of times before it gets into the microphone, trying to get the sound to be past that 35 millisecond marker so it doesn't fall into that discernible comb filtering problems of the 35 milliseconds and below. Still following?
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm explaining this because I like to use that in my favor. I tend to set spatial delays within that 35 milliseconds on purpose, and pull that delay left and right and play with the flipping the phase to, yes, use comb filter to alter tonality, but also how it affects the spatial content with it. Okay? Let me dial up something here quickly. Let's go to Avid. Let's go to the trusty mod delay. This thing hasn't changed in forever. I'm happy about that. Let me grab this.
I've been walking in a dark room.
Okay, so here's simple voice. It's a ballad. I want to create space. I want to widen that vocal. So if everybody's accustomed to just hearing, let me get that going there. Yeah, everybody's accustomed to having, sync on. Let's do something like this, something like that. I'm going to send this.
I've been walking in a dark room.
Sorry, I can't get this out of that output because it's not going to work well. I got to do it here.
I've been walking in a dark room.
Now let's start with the Haas effect. Because the signal is going to the left and the right with the same amplification, that delay is going to sound up the middle. And it's going to cloudy up the space behind her. So if I lower the signal on one side,
I've been walking in a dark room.
now that delay is to the side, you're still having the sound, the effect of a delay, but it's not clouding up the middle. The other way to do that is for you to change the amount just a little bit. So you can do, if that's 208, why don't I do 218?
I've been walking in a dark room.
Notice that that sounds different. I'm hearing that vocal now be stereoized, if you want to use that term, if that's a word at all. But now the vocal sounds out this way. Because the signal on the right side is sooner, you hear that first, and this becomes diminished in energy or not as highlighted.
I've been walking.
Right? You can compensate for that by lowering the right channel, which is the sooner channel, which forces your ear to hear this one stronger, and it creates a sort of balance.
I've been walking in a dark room.
You're highlighting this, the stereoized effect is still there, but your ear's going more to this, okay? This is staying within the realm of time and syncing with BPM. Let's get into making things sound weird. Let's start. I like using primary numbers. I picked this from one of my professors. There was a whole math about it. Let's listen to this.
I've been walking in a dark room.
Whoever did not understand or experience comb filtering, there you are. You're welcome. That sounds nasty. That's comb filtering. So why do I say that I like using things in this realm? Because I don't just leave it like that. Let me start by doing this. And let's do 7.
I've been walking in a dark room.
1/7, one is 13 milliseconds, but notice that the comb filtering isn't as apparent anymore. There's still something weird there, but it just sounds like she's in a space, confined in a small space, but it kind of works to create some sort of environment and stereo image. So now we can start filtering some of the high frequencies that we don't want affected.
So, just for real quick for my clarity, are we hearing both the dry and wet signal right now? Okay, so the delay aux is playing as well.
Yes, you're hearing consoles on, so you're hearing the vocal go out of 5 and 6, and my effects returns for all plugins go to the Dutch, which is its own separate input into the mixing console.
Okay.
Channels 1 through 16 are going through my Neve. 1 through 14 are going through my Neve console. 15 and 16 are going through my SSL mix bus. And then I have another stereo input that's just going straight into the Dutch without any console coloration. And that's my effects return because it really enhances the verbs.
So that explains why it's coming out even though it's not soloed.
Well, I solo saved it.
Oh, that explains why. Okay.
This is what I keep telling all you guys, that you should always solo save your effects returns. So again, filtering the top end.
I've been walking in a dark room. I've been walking in a dark room. I've been walking.
You guys hearing the difference, dry and then delay, right? And then just doing some of that started messing around with it, started allowing more of that top end air to play around. And we are not even dialing up any feedback. Do you guys know what feedback is? Okay, feedback is you creating a loop, a controlled loop circuit. So you're sending signal into the delay, which creates one delay. You looping that signal back into itself creates another repeat of the repeat. So you get a second delay, but that second delay now sounds lower in volume because it's going through the same amplified circuit. And depending on the technology that you're using, especially if it's tape or if it's analog delays, boxes, each time it runs through the circuit, it gets more color. Where that's good or that's bad depends how you like that color. But every time it's getting amplified through that circuit, through whatever filters, through whatever noise, and it starts sounding more and more processed as it goes down, and also starts sounding softer. So
I have a specific effect for it that I'm thinking of that like an artist does where it's a tape delay where it becomes like super filtered the longer the delay goes on. That just clicked for me.
and you can, depending on some of the reverb delay boxes, you can have the initial delay be clean, and then the loop feedback go through another circuit that can just get filtered over filtered over filtered. Okay. So now if we add feedback, you're going to hear multiple of that delay.
I've been walking in a dark room. I've been walking.
Versus
I've been walking in a dark room.
Can't hear you.
so you got your delay time, you got your high frequency filter to just give some more clarity, and you got your feedback. Okay. Now this isn't still sounding great, but it's kind of giving you some movement and some sense of depth. Then you get into modulation. And now let's get into what a chorus and a flanger are. Can somebody define how you create a chorus with a delay. How do you create a flanger with a delay?
No.
Lots of no. Okay.
No.
Okay. It's tricky because the definition is just one slight thing. Chorus and a flanger are modulated delays. No, you had your time, Patrick. Now you're going to have to let me do it. So, a chorus is you have a fixed delay. Let's say in this case, I have the vocal at 7 and at 13. And I'm going to add a modulation circuit to the delay time, the 7 and the 13. And I'm going to add a parameter of plus 10, minus 10. And that modulation is now going to make those parameters get closer and farther from that center. So it's going to be, on the 13 side, it's going to go from 3 to 23 to 13, 3, 13, 23. It's going to go up and down. And it's going to shift that delay. Sorry. Did I start with, did I say chorus? Did I say flange?
You said chorus, but you're talking about flanger right
Yes,
now, aren't
thank
you?
you.
Okay.
I always have to think about that one more time. So yeah, sorry. Let me take a step back. It always happens. Chorus. A chorus is you modulating the pitch of a delay. Flange is you modulating the timing of a delay. And because of that, you get completely different effects. Chorus, the idea is to imitate a sound of a choir, the sound of you stacking vocals. If you have a choir, you have 5 people standing on one microphone. Again, we're going to the Haas effect. If I'm standing in front of the microphone, I'm going to be the closest. The people next to me are going to be a foot to 2 feet closer, farther away, so their arrival time to the microphone is going to be different. The people on the extremes are going to be 5 feet away, so their timing to the microphone is going to be different. So those timings are fixed around that microphone, and you're going to get like multiple little voices getting with a range of 1, 2, 6, 7 milliseconds apart. But what's going to be different is my sense of pitch and the other 4 people's sense of pitch is not going to be perfectly the same. We're never going to hit the note exactly the same. And that variation in pitch causes a modulation of that note. And that's what chorusing is. It is the same note multiple times, but each multiple of it has a slight variation to it. So you are on a chorusing effect, you are modulating the pitch of each of those delays, which makes that the voice sound thicker, or whatever you're processing the chorusing through makes it sound thicker. Okay, because it sounds like multiple of them. Flanging, correcting here, is one source, one delay. But remember, if you have one source and a static delay, especially within 35 milliseconds, it's going to sound like comb filtering. And a static comb filtering sounds nasty. So what you do is you modulate that delay so it moves up and down. Let's go back to the 13 milliseconds. So it's going to modulate to 3 seconds to 13 to 23 to 13. But I already said that causes comb filtering. Yes, what you're doing is you're sweeping up and down in the comb filtering. So remember in the EQ class when I would put, I would try to find a frequency, and I would use the bandpass filter, and you would just hear just that one frequency. And I would sweep up and down. That's kind of what you're going to be hearing. You're going to be hearing a, and that's the exaggerated comb filtering. Why is this pleasing? Because it is a different way to modulate a sound that thickens and changes the tonality in an instrument, but not by making it sound like multiple, but by slightly varying the tonality up and down, which gives a uneasiness and a non-fixed tonal stability to that instrument. So, for example, if you have a lead instrument, let's say Patrick wants to layer 15 guitars on a song, and when you're on track number 14 and 15, you can't even freaking make out the guitar parts because there's so many freaking guitar parts, and you really need this lead guitar part done. But if he used the exact same guitar and the exact same amp, it's same tone over same tone over same tone. We've learned in this class that you can change the EQ and compression to vary that tonality. But there's only so much you can vary that tonality. If I now add a flanger to that track 14 and 15, I am mildly to severely changing the tonality, and it's constantly shifting. And because it's constantly shifting, your ear is constantly pulled to it because it now does not blend into the mass of guitars. Does that explain it a little bit?
Okay, yeah, so if you have a bunch of, for in this example, if you have a bunch of guitars with the same tone, but you want one of them to stand out, you can put like a flanger on it to make the tone different.
Correct. That's why you tend to see flangers on guitar pedal rigs. Okay. Phasers can be the same thing as a chorus and a flanger, but you're modulating what instead?
The filter.
The all-pass filter that causes the phase shift. So normally you see like the orange pedal 90, which is the typical 90 Eddie Van Halen type of phaser. That is taking the signal and shifting it 90 degrees out of phase, and that's a fixed phase, right? But you can now vary that phase by modulating the degree of that phase. So you're now creating sort of a different effect than a flanger, because a flanger is changing the time, so it comb filters different frequencies within the wavelength. Phaser is changing the degree of phase, the amount of phase, because of how it's shifted within that all pass filter. So you're kind of just shifting, 10 degrees, 90, 95, 10, and just sweeping back and forth. Okay, so let's start with hearing simple chorusing. Here's micro pitch. So basically you have now a delay, fixed delay. Let me put it both at the same place. And each delay is now being processed by a fixed pitch shift. I am pitch shifting one side negative 9 cents down, and the other side 9 cents up in pitch. This effect is used on so many frickin' recordings, you have no idea. The micro pitch is a patch on the Eventide H3000, and it's become a staple within the industry. There are people that own multiple H3000s, and one of them just is set to this setting and never gets changed from that setting. Okay, so here it is.
I've been walking in a dark room.
Can't hear you.
Thank you. Notice how that sounds different than this.
I've been walking in a dark room. I've been walking in a dark room.
When it's pitch shifted, suddenly that vocal sounds wider, and that vocal signal in the middle moves forward because there's less comb filtering happening to that vocal. It's less similar to the original source, so the comb filtering does not affect it the same way. And the further we go away from the original pitch, the less similar it's going to be, the more that vocal is going to move forward.
I've been walking in a dark room.
Okay? If we now start modulating the effect, it's going to work a little bit differently. Do you guys understand what modulation is?
Is it like like basically I'm gonna just throw out the like it's like a LFO, like a frequency, a very low frequency that just goes back and forth on any desired parameter.
Madison, can you refine that a little bit?
I was gonna not like say more of the specifics of the filtering, but modulation itself is the altering of the signal. So you're changing it in a way that in a I don't know how to like define modular other than saying it you're adjusting it on a modular level opposed to
A fixed level?
thank you.
All right. So you're both right. So you pick a parameter and you assign a modulation parameter to that, to what you're trying to alter, and you assign an LFO, low frequency oscillator. And that low frequency oscillator, you dial up two things: the rate, which is frequency. If you dial up a low frequency oscillator at 1 hertz, it's going to be a very long, slow wavelength. That is a low rate. If you pitch it up to 15 hertz, that wave is going to move much faster. That is a higher rate. Depth is the amplification amount of that low frequency oscillator. Low amplification is a low depth. High amplification, high depth. So you're going to really hear that oscillator affect the amount of shift that modulation is creating. That to help you tie it up a little bit better? Okay. So let's exaggerate this.
I've been walking in a dark room. I've been walking in a dark room. I've been walking in a dark room.
Without it.
I've I've been walking in a dark room.
Let's get into.
I've been walking in a dark room.
It's a little more of an exaggerated chorus like that. Okay. Let's see if this gives me enough. You know what? What I want to do, really want to do.
Is that a phase meter?
On
Like
the bottom,
Yeah,
that lightning thing.
yeah.
That is a little feature gimmick of this series where you can establish parameters. On this, you see this blue bar up here. I can alter that blue bar, and then I can create parameter shifts by automating this, and it'll control whatever I want it to. So I can tell it do this or do this, or wherever in the middle. And it's basically an expression bar that you can actually automate. So if you put that as an automated parameter and you assign that to a fader, you can have some fun with that. All right, let's go to a full-on chorus.
I've been walking in a dark room. I've been walking in a dark room.
Notice with this chorus, this voice is getting thicker and thicker and thicker as I expand these parameters. Let me kill the chorus.
I've been walking in a dark room.
With it?
I've been walking in a dark room.
Now, mind you, I am sending 100% of the signal to the effect, so you're hearing way more than I would use in an actual mix.
Is there something else I can help with?
Wow, jeez, phone. Technology. Okay, so when you're hearing a vocal in a pop mix, in a ballad, and that vocal just sounds big, it like taking way more space than you think it should, chances are they have a really nice chorus dialed up on it, because now that voice, instead of sounding a dot in the middle, takes this much space in the middle, and it's how you use modulation, time effects to make that voice sound bigger. If we dial it up a little bit better,
I've been walking in a dark room.
let me add the synths at the beginning.
I've been walking in a dark room.
Out it.
I've been walking in a dark room.
With it.
I've been walking in a dark room.
It completely changes the placement of the vocal. It changes not just that, but how thick it sounds, where it sits in the mix, and of course now we get into thinking of how we use an effect to set an instrument or an element higher or lower in the mix height-wise. You can make that chorus on the brighter side.
I've been walking.
Or make it on the darker side.
I've been walking.
I tend to put an EQ at the beginning of my effects returns. So then I can alter this more than majority of the plugins allow me to. And I can automate and have some fun with it also, because if I go over here and I crank this, I'm still allowing some frequencies to cut through. Let me do this.
I've been walking. I've been walking in a dark room.
Obviously, it's good filtrations happening there on this plugin. Not all plugins let you dial something up that drastically, but
I've been walking in a dark room.
let's say that's as much low end as I want. But when I hear it with the vocal,
I've been walking.
it's affecting my 5K to 4K area on her vocal a little too much. So now, subtractive EQing.
I've been walking in a dark room. I've been walking in a dark room. I've been walking in a dark room.
Let me put the track on so you can hear how that 4K sticks out a little more or less.
I've been walking in a dark room. I've been walking in a dark room.
Definitely. It had almost a phasiness to it beforehand that it sounds like it was in the 3 to 4K or 4 to 5K range.
And now you hear it around everything, and now you're preserving the consonants, the clarity of it, but it still has this nice warming, thickening effect to it. Okay? And those are things you have to keep in mind. Coursings and flanges can create resonance within themselves, so you can maybe alter those resonances that way. Okay?
So you have that EQ pre-chorus on your aux for your
Yeah. So
Okay.
I tend to, and you can see this. Let me see if you guys can see. Okay. From here to here are all the effects I'm using on this song. And do I not have... See, I'm using some compressors, and some of these things I already am affecting the frequencies here. The other thing that I am doing here, which I'll get into this class now, is... Okay. Here, here, and here are effects that I have printed from the Eventide. And I am altering those effects as they're being played back. And I sit down and I dial this up to get the effect I want. And then I add the EQ to make it sit however I need to sit. And I can automate that if I need to automate it also.
and so that's sitting in parallel with your vocals.
Yes, so exactly. So since I only have one Eventide, I dial it up, print it for the entire song, and then mute it, unmute it however I need to, and alter it however I need to. In the same way I would if it was, in the case of this delay, I will put an EQ first. I might even put a compressor next, and then the reverb, the delay, whatever else. So I can alter and control the signal fed into the delay. And this kind of comes into me getting obsessed with controlling the sidechain of a compressor and how I want it to respond, and how nice of controlling effects that I can get from manipulating the sidechain. I started applying similar things to processing the signal before it hits the effect. So then I can put a compressor on a vocal, and if the signal belts, the verb doesn't open up drastically and quickly with the vocal. You hear the tail, you hear some of the energy, but it allows the big note to actually move forward to you because it's not being drowned out by the verb, and it moves in your face and then moves back into the place, but that verb still sounds nice and open. Okay? So, chorusing. Now let's get into flanges.
I've been walking in a dark room. 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 I've been walking in a dark room.
This box is awesome. Very easy to go to an extreme with it. But on a voice, it can sound just a little uneasy because you're not accustomed to hearing a voice be processed heavily, and our ears are very sensitive to it. But again, on a lead guitar or something else like that, where it really can make a guitar that's on a heavy mix shift and stick out, is to be priceless on it, right?
Flanger is the one that phases the signal, right?
That's a phaser. Chorus modulates the pitch. Flanger modulates the time, the delay time. Phaser modulates the phasing amount. I'm sorry if I confused you guys before with that.
No, it's just there's like a lot, and they're all like very similar.
And the beauty of it, they're all delays, right? But how do you modulate things is what makes the difference. But the results are very different. A chorus, even on a chorus as an extreme, it can still sound pleasant. A flanger as an extreme can easily... A flanger on extreme is just really not fun. Unless you're just trying to annoy somebody, which I like doing. But you kind of have to dial up lightly. Cool things that I like using a flanger, besides what I mentioned with a lead guitar, is I like layering flangers with other effects, especially on synthesizers, to enrich a synth's pad and create more alterations. And I make sure that I'm not putting a flanger on the as an insert on the pad, but as a send. So the flanger is reacting against the original source and pulling and pushing against the dry source and creating a more harmonic enrichment. Okay? Do you guys know what this is? It's a correlation meter. Okay?
I've been walking in a dark room.
This is measuring how much the signal is in phase and out of phase. When you see it more on the going on the x axle than the y axle, there are things that are happening that are making the mix sound out of phase, which is what you get out of choruses and flanges, and just using any type of delays also on it, right? So figuring out how much and where that is the fun part. So if I have nothing,
I've been walking in a dark room.
signal is like a straight line up the middle. If I add simple delays,
I've been walking in a dark room.
now the line is not as narrow. It's just starting to thicken up a little bit. If I add some pitch shifted delays,
I've been walking in a dark room.
now you start visualizing how that voice starts sounding thicker, bigger. Not thicker in the frequency wise, although that's true, but bigger space being captured, right? We go to a heavy chorus.
I've been walking in a dark room.
And you hear how things are now moving left and right and taking more space out here, really pushing that vocal to the sides. Flanging.
I've been walking.
Let me pull some of the fun ones. Hold on. There's so many settings on this thing.
So
I've been
with all of
walking.
these,
Yes.
with all of these, there are like mono and stereo options, right?
Good point. Yes. But I'm trying to explain everything from a stereo point because that's where the advantages are. In the sense of creating wider mixes, creating bigger elements, stuff. There are definitely space for mono versions of these. Like a slapback delay tends to be a mono source. If we go to the original, it's just one track on a delay, tape delay, right? And there's a purpose and a function for it. But then you get into, do you leave that slap delay dry, or do you send that slap delay to the same verb that you're using on the vocal, so that delay becomes part of that performance, right? So now you're taking a mono source and now you're putting it in a stereo widening field and making all that part of the bigger sound of the vocal. Did you guys get to see the videos of CLA that I posted on the announcements?
I saw that they were posted.
I've seen some of those videos before.
Okay.
So,
Watch them because it really does expand on what I'm getting into here also. And he has a particular way on using this. I'm just trying to get into the bottom of it and then the basics of it, and you can see a full-blown application on how he does it. So everybody kind of getting a visualization of what's happening in the stereo field with the correlation meter? Does that help you a little bit just with that? Okay. So we can use delays to put an instrument in a space, right? And with the Haas effect, if we are shifting delays within a 1 to 35 milliseconds, you can perceive the ambience, the room size, the parameters that you're in because you're getting slight comb filtering happening, and that comb filtering helps with kind of location, with placement. Okay, changes in amplification within those delay sends also will alter that shift. So if you are trying to take a source, let's say a guitar, and you pan it to 50, and I want to create an environment where that guitar sounds heavy to the left, and I've panned it, well, I guess in Pro Tools it would be negative 50, right? I can now take a mono delay, and that mono delay, I can now pan it to 90, negative 90. So delay is going to happen further right. And as I'm playing and as I'm adjusting that parameter, I can create this image shift where you hear the guitar and it decays off to the side. And that shift can help pull those instruments farther out than when they're just placed here. Which, when there's not much happening and you have a guitar 50-50 and delays pushing out, you're giving a sensation that the instruments are moving outwards. Then when you get to the next section of a song, maybe it's a chorus and you get some heavy guitars and they're panned hard left and right. Now that sounds like a fuller environment, and now you're creating different a variation in movement left and right. You're kind of giving the sensation of not fixing the image too tightly within the stereo field. You're allowing things to move out, but not in an obvious way. So then the next section comes in, something actually loud comes out of the left and right. There's more of an impact. I know I'm throwing a lot at you guys here, but I want you to try to image and visualize the function of delays in that sense, where you can also take a guitar, pan to 50, pan that delay to the opposite side. And what you're going to get is the opposite. You're shrinking the image of that guitar. The image is going to sound more in the center because it's confining it within, here's the guitar, here's the other limit of the image of the guitar. It's going to bounce within this area. So if you want that guitar to be more pan it out but capture this middle range area, you do it that way. Now you're kind of doing what you're doing with the vocal when you're chorusing. You're making the vocal sit here, expanding it outward. With a delay, you have a guitar here, you pan the delay to the other side. You're not widening your image, you're shrinking and limiting the area of space it's going to take. And then that means that you can now take other instruments and pan them out past that guitar. So you have some elements moving outward and the guitar staying inward. So you can now modulate that delay, and it's modulating this way and other things are modulating this way. So now you're getting all sorts of movements on this song with pads that in any other sense would just be a static element. But if you make them modulate outward, that can be huge. And you make other elements modulate internally within the center image, that can be huge too. You have the vocal modulating from center out. Now you're creating all this movement to this performance. Let me now play this mix. You can hear all these concepts play out on the song, and then I'll jump into the different rendered effects that I've done on them, okay? Here we go. Give me a thumbs up to make sure you're hearing it.
I've been walking in a dark room. I've tied my laces, tripping over the truth. And I've tried so hard just to
Cool. Thoughts?
I noticed off the top of my head the a guitar delay thing where it was like hand from one side to the other, and then also a bunch of little you did like a chorus or flanging thing on the vocals to make them sound bigger, I think, and then a bunch of little reverb effects.
That sounds about right. A bunch. Yes. I have my typical guitar setup, so I always have a guitar delay in stereo, and then I tend to have a second guitar delay, possibly mono, that I'll use as I just mentioned. Here's a lead guitar, and I'm going to pan that delay to the opposite side or to the same side farther out. This is my guitar effects chain. This guitar effect, I've been using this chain for years, and it's just a series of plugins. Madison, like you asked before, first thing is the Pro EQ, and I'm filtering out all the low end I don't need, and I'm lowering by 0.7 dB all that top end edge that I want that edge to move forward and not be overly processed on the guitar. Then I am going to a micro shift, the Sound Toys version, which I am mixing about 30% in. It detunes and delays just like the Eventide version. Then I am flanging the heck out of the guitar. And you can see how drastic it's doing that shift in delay, right? Then I am modulating the delay, so I now have a 400 millisecond like slap verb on it with no real feedback, 1-2%. And it's slightly modular also, right? Just ever so slightly. 9% on depth on one side, 4% depth on the other, but now the rates are also different. A rate of 1.07 and 2.04. So the rate of modulation and depth are different on the left and the right. I'm trying to create a effect that is not equal in the left and the right. Just like a room, a concert hall, the left and the right wall is not going to sound perfectly the same. Plus, if you're standing off of center, you're going to perceive the delays in that room slightly different. Right? And if that wasn't enough, I am now sending it through the Ozone Imager, which is a MS widener. So let's hear these guitars.
It won't be. It won't be long for the light to break through, and it's time.
Without it, the exact same guitar part played by Samsung Guitar and the exact same guitarist. There's, they're not perfect, which is fine, but one will play slightly ahead of the other, and then when that one plays ahead of the other, it kind of masks the attack of the second one. That kind of gets a little bit into that Haas effect. So it almost is constantly leaning one side or the other when it's dry. Right? But now Because all these are going in mix and blend modes, one instrument is blending into the other instrument. One plugin is blending into the other plugin. I'm allowing some of the non-delayed signal to get all the way through and be effective. So you do have that slap, but you have some of the chorusing and flanging affecting everything else. If I was to just eliminate the slap, those guitars sound way thicker than here. You're hearing a lot of the plucking and the top end. Here, that chorusing and flanging are adding a lot of that body. Let me mute the flanging. Now it just sounds like there's multiples of that guitar. It sounds a little thicker, but more of the top end is enhanced, and there's a little bit of ambiance that's happening at the top end because of the chorusing here. But that thickening effect is really the flange. That's one of the things I love about flange. Another place I use flange is on bass guitar, especially on reggae songs where that bass just needs to be full and commanding. Sometimes on some EDM bass lines, if it's an actual melodic bass line, I'll do that. If it's just bass drops and stuff, that can remove impact. And to be more specific, the flanger that I like using is an Eventide flanger. When I try to use other flange effects from other companies, it doesn't quite sound as nice or give me the same result. There's a specific patch on the H3000 called Multiflange that I use it all the time for that same reason. Okay. So this is how I'm layering effects to create this big sonic sound on just a guitar, right? Now let's hear what I'm doing on the vocals. Because this song was a very emotional song for her, and the story, how the message is going on, where she kind of felt isolated and alone in this place, and like she mentions in the beginning of the song, she was in a dark place. The first thing that I wanted to do is create that dark space for the vocal. So this is a verb I dialed up on the Eventide. It almost makes it sound like you are in some sort of warehouse, confined space, and it's not a bright verb, it's a dark verb. Let me add her back.
I've been walking in a dark room.
So I purposely put her in a room, in a confined space. And that's what you're hearing with the keys.
I've been walking in a dark room.
And if I take that out,
I've been walking in a dark room.
the vocal effect right in your face is cool, but there's no connection. I really wanted to kind of build this where she is kind of lost in her head, and dialing up the right verb for me does so much to the storyline.
I've been walking in a dark room,
Then when she starts singing the harmony,
and I've tried so hard just to find the word.
I also put that vocal in that space. I believe I used a little bit of a different space. Let me verify that.
So hard.
I really wanted to dial up a verb for that harmony that just had that airiness, hauntingness goes. So again, here's another voice in her head joining the conversation in it and just kind of altering her emotional state. So then when you hear both voices,
And I've tried so hard just to find the word. And I fall.
and I love layering effects, so I'm also sending that harmony to this verb.
I've tried so hard just to find the word. I fought so hard just to measure up.
And that long verb is actually going to this verb. This is a beautiful, lush verb that you can get from Relab. I am putting a little EQ on that, but I'm also sending it to this 6.7 second verb from called the Black Hole, and I can put a notch filter on that 3K range area and a notch filter on 300, which is the note foundation of the note of this key, so it doesn't muddying up the fundamental and it doesn't alter the pronunciation too much, and basically doesn't allow those two key points to be reproduced in that verb at all because it's a notch filter. So then you have this blend of both of these.
I've tried so hard.
And they're layered. So you hear this first.
I've tried so hard.
Right? But then you also have this.
I've tried so hard just to find the word.
Both together.
I've tried so hard just to find the.
I'll add the third layer of the eventide.
I've tried so hard just to find the word.
And just as soon as you hear the eventide, you hear how wide it makes it sound. Just that chorusing effect it's a rich chorus verb that I picked for it, and it just moves that vocal outward, versus the other two make it move back. So it just has this outward and surrounding you type of sensation that's wrapping around everything.
And I've tried so hard just to find the word. And I fought so hard.
And then when we get a little further down, I feel like I need to keep expanding on the vocal, because now the band is fully in.
It won't be long.
And now her tone and her message is changed. There's a little more hope to it. So I start pulling her out of this room.
It won't be long.
And I introduce this room.
It won't be long for the light to break through.
And then this is a flanger fed into a modded delayed verb. So when you have a flanger here, it creates that separation from the lead. It's a very weird sounding effect by itself, but it creates this, it's first a mono send, right? That goes into a stereo outfield. So if you hear the effect going back and out, back and out.
It won't be long for
So I take careful notice of how I layer my effects to create movement in the right direction. I want to have that lead vocal stayed focused here. That's why on that verse, I just had that room on the lead vocal, but on the harmony, I had that wrap around you. Because the hauntingness should be from that harmony, not from the lead. The lead's always here. And there's so many things happening in the song that whatever I added to that lead needed to keep it focused and then out of its way.
it won't be long for the light to break through. As time goes on.
So then now we get into, let's get a little further down where we get into this outro part. Now the song gets into the hopeful part. So then I have a medium delay that I'm using on that vocal. Where's the medium delay? I'm using an 1/8 note delay, and I tend to mess around a lot, high cut, low cut, and I'll mess around shaping that delay frequency wise however I need it to make it cut how I need it to cut, with some saturation, with some wobble, which is its way of kind of getting a little tape modulation happening there. Okay, so I will dial up this a lot. Let me see if I can just mute this and this.
I'm not running, no, I'm not running. I'm not running for the tree line.
Not a straightforward vocal, it's not an imitation, it is heavily processed delay, but it blends in well. It's not obvious, but once you know to look for it, it's there, right? And then the other thing that you'll see is all of a sudden this pops up. Half is a dual echo, half note, triplet half note on one side, dotted quarter note on the other, different high and low cut, different style, different settings, and I'm actually pushing the saturation a little bit more on this one. And then let me just do this and do this. Mute the delay.
I'm not running, not running.
And I love using rhythmic elements, and I really like using the triplet and the dotted and combining them because it kind of gives this kind of back and forth, back and forth, back and forth to it to just create some ear candy. But when you do things in rhythm, like on a quarter note, on an eighth note, on a 16th note, they blend into the mass of elements of instruments. But when you do a triplet and a dotted, it's now syncopated, so it sticks out and shifts the balance and the groove differently. Play this section by itself.
Running for the forest, not running for the forest, running for the forest.
Can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. So I have two verbs. One's more like a room, natural. One's a heavily processed type of verb. And I have two different delays. And that long delay is being sent to the long verb. So I don't make that long verb with the triplet and the dotted be dry and in your face and stick out, because I'm not trying to do it as an effect to be obvious. I'm trying to create this image bounce, this sustained ear candy filler on that vocal to create this accent on these longer notes that need to be held there. And then but let them blend into the space, everything creating the space and moving everything within that space. Okay, so this is why I'm telling you, when you create this template, please create, your three delays, your three verbs when you're doing this. Okay. Let me go back here for a minute. So now, rubric. Create reverb for staging. Use verb to create stage and depth in your mix. That's what we did in the first classes. Using reverb for tonal shaping, like you saw me do, I am changing the tonality of the verb, and even in per section, to change the shape and the response of that vocal within the mix. Okay. Try to have two verbs, one that could be on the brighter side and thinner side, another one that could be on the thicker and the darker side, and then mute and unmute both as you use them through the song, or change the blend of these verbs as you're altering. You can have a verse on the brighter side, less of the dark. When you get to the chorus, you can have a darker verb, so it makes that vocal sound bigger. This is what I mean by using it for tonal shaping. This is why I'm using multiple verbs here, and I'm altering those verbs also to affect however I need it to create tonal shape and shifting and movement. And as the song gets bigger, I'm adding more layers so the vocal also gets bigger in intensity with it. Okay. And then reverb as an effect. I kind of mentioned that gets into a little sound design. That could be something that you dial up, on a shaker, on the drums, or something else that you can kind of play around with. You can incorporate a delay as an effect and throw it on some verb and make all that an effect. And I'll do a quick example of that now. Delay for staging, try to create a stereo delay where the left and the right have slight differences in milliseconds and slight changes in differences in modulation, rate, and depth, so that each delay doesn't sound like each other. They're not in time with each other, and they're varied enough away from the lead vocal or from whatever you're applying it to create that depth. I tend to have, let me see if I'm using it here on the violins. Yes, I have a depth delay patch that I always use. Again, an EQ. Here is the precision delay where I am filtering the signal, and I am a delay of 17, a delay of 23 milliseconds, filtering that signal, modifying that signal by 7.5, okay? And I have a couple other parameters that I really like about this that I use. Then that delay is ran through a pitch shifter. And remember, and I'm blending it in percentages, so that delay starts sounding a little altered and shifted that way. And then that is going to a verb. And that's what you're hearing on the strings over here. We had fun with these strings.
It won't be long for the light to break.
Sorry, I turned that off.
It won't be long for the light to break through. And it's time.
Okay, here's where you're using a delay to create depth, because there's variances within the left and the right. Think of a room. A room's not going to be symmetrical, so you're going to try to keep some of these changes there. Okay, use delay for time. Use a delay for time base and tonal shifting. Anything that you do within this realm where you're now filtering the top end of the delay or filtering the bottom end of the delay and you blend it in will now add a tonal shift. If you want to emphasize the air of the vocals, then you thin out that delay and make the delay extend the top end of the vocals, and now it's creating a shimmery top end, right? Same with verbs. And then as an effect can be a ping pong delay. Okay, some of the delays you heard me do there where there are odd rhythmic times there. Here's another example of how I use delays, and this is going back more to effects. Let me go to I did have that in the, I did move that over here. Okay. Here is, here's a beat that a client brought. Okay, hold on. This is one I need to play. Sorry. Yes. Sorry. I decided to add this. That is not me singing, by the way. I sing much worse than that. That is Matt, one of our A&R guy, great producer, singer, and we decided it needed something else. So this is how I layer multiple effects to take a sound and turn it into something different. Now pay attention to the track and you'll hear it in the background. And of course, the client was very confused when we started with this because we were like, Madam is like, I need something. Just get on the mic. And he's like, oh, I got something. And he just does these noises. And the client's like, are you really going to put that on my song? It's like, it's going to sound great. Don't worry about it. After I was done with all the layering stuff, he hears it's like, oh, it just added something moving, something that wasn't this programmed, synchronized, put the little dots and everything sounds exactly the same. There's some movement and character into that chorus just because of this odd vocal performance. And because of the modulation, it expands out. There's a phaser on it, so you hear it go. And I timed that phasing modulation to the tempo of the song. So every bar, it goes up and then it goes down on the next bar, up and then down. So it has this movement that's cohesive with the song. The delays are cohesive with the song. And then I have some other weird pitch shifting things happening that kind of start from center, moving outward, start from center, moving outward, and expands to it. There's so many things you can do with delay and time base. That's why I almost think I need 2 more classes to really get into it. And a lot of inspiration and ideas of what I got on how I think of delays is working with a producer. This guy was taken under the wing from Elton John because of his writing and stuff, and he really brought a lot of experimentation to it. And I got to work with this producer on Cirque du Soleil show. It's I forgot the name. It's the one where it's a magician that was in New York for a while. And we spent 3 days taking vocals, and we took every effects box that was at Fat Planet, the Eventides, the TCs. We rented a modulator. We got phasers. We got chorus. We got some pedals. And I had these on multiple sends and buses on the console, and I had all these layered side by side. So we took a vocal, we just started hitting buses and effect sends and then sending it to multiple things to create this layer. And then we'd send this effect into that send, into that verb, into this other thing. And then just create these rich, weird tonal palettes that are blended into the music of that Cirque du Soleil songs.
I really got to get going.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I'll post the rest in a little bit, but thanks for everything. So there's so much you can do with this. The only limitation you should have on this is time. But play around with effects, play around with chorusing effects, with flanger effects, and delays there. Just think of from a natural point of view of a verb and a delay to create some depth, but then also use delays and effects like chorusing and flanging and rhythmic delays to create width on a song. Got it?
Yeah, no flangers or anything.
Yeah. Anything that's a time-based effect. So reverb, delays, chorus, flange. And this definitely is one that is more on the experimental side. The main things I need to see you do is proper routing, like we went on the first class, create multiple auxes, assign bus sends to those auxes, label, rename those bus sends like you see here, ambient verb, doubler, depth delay, effects delay, ambient 2, long delay, short delay, chorus, flange, label those buses, and then apply those different buses to the sends of the different tracks. So I can trace the signal flow and I can mute and I can just figure out what you're trying to do. And by all means, if you have a delay, feel free to send that delay to a verb and to a chorus and to a flange and experiment. All in the interest of sounding more musical and try to make it sound like it's adding something to the track. Depth, intricacy, modulation, movement. And of course, if you push things to the extreme, like I did in the last example, then make sure that you tuck it in the right way so it doesn't detract from the lead vocal or the lead instrument. Cool? Have fun with it. I'm going to post this class also so you can go back on it and refresh it. Email me if you have any questions. Cool? Take care, guys. Have a nice week.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks.